The phrase "the customer is always right" is the greatest lie ever sold to modern society. Sometimes the customer is so spectacularly wrong that it actively defies the established laws of physics. We tracked down the most shameless, completely unhinged store returns in American history. Grab a drink because the sheer level of audacity here is a massive headache waiting to happen. 1. The complaint form for this absolute masterpiece of a return simply read, "made an inconvenient mess." What was the product? A standard fire extinguisher. This genius had successfully put out a raging grease fire in his kitchen, but was now furiously demanding a full refund because the white powdery retardant had gotten all over his precious countertops. Apparently, a completely burnt-down house would have been a much tidier and more acceptable outcome for this guy. You save his entire home from becoming a pile of smoldering ash, and he penalizes the store for the cleanup. Some people really just want to watch the world burn, as long as it does not leave a dust ring. 2. This next one is a classic tragedy of the summer season. A supposedly defective bottle of SPF 50 sunscreen was returned for complete product failure. The man proudly showed off his glowing bright red sunburn as absolute proof of the scam. After a little questioning, he casually admitted he had applied the lotion exactly once at dawn before spending 8 consecutive hours aggressively swimming and lounging in a chlorinated pool. The label clearly said water-resistant, not a magical invincibility potion. You cannot just smear a thin layer of cream on your face and expect to outsmart the actual sun for an entire business day. 3. The item slammed onto the customer service counter was a massive, cylindrical container of ordinary Morton salt. The official reason provided for this utterly absurd return attempt was that the product was far too salty for his taste. You seriously cannot make this kind of stupidity up. He had willingly purchased a giant container of pure sodium chloride and was completely shell-shocked to discover its inherent chemical properties. It is like buying a massive bag of ice and filing a corporate grievance because it feels a bit chilly. Sir, you literally bought the dictionary definition of salt. What were you expecting? A hint of vanilla? 4. A severely faded car air freshener was brought back because the signature pine scent had completely vanished. On the surface, this might sound like a somewhat reasonable consumer complaint. That is, until the clerk noticed the pale, crusty little cardboard tree in question had clearly been hanging from his rearview mirror since the late 1990s. This dude was honestly treating a $1 piece of fragrant cardboard like it came with an eternal lifetime subscription service. It is an absolute miracle the thing had not disintegrated into fine dust, let alone failed to make his rusty sedan smell like a majestic forest. 5. An incredibly expensive high-tech baby monitor was brought back because the video feed was horribly blurry and indistinct. The deeply concerned parents were absolutely convinced their premium gadget was totally broken right out of the box. However, a 5-second inspection by a deeply unamused store employee revealed the true culprit. The parents had simply forgotten to peel off the cheap, thin protective plastic film that comes plastered right over the camera lens. They were essentially broadcasting through a thick layer of factory packaging and aggressively blaming the manufacturer for their own tragic lack of basic unboxing skills. 6. The rejected product was a standard stick of solid antiperspirant. The customer was absolutely furious, claiming the deodorant made his armpits all white and chalky. This deep medical mystery was instantly solved when the guy casually revealed he had been rubbing the stick directly onto the outside fabric of his dark-colored shirts, completely bypassing his actual skin. He was treating a basic personal hygiene product like a massive piece of industrial tailor chalk. How someone manages to reach full adulthood without understanding the fundamental daily mechanics of applying deodorant is a dark mystery that modern science may never solve. 7. A pair of wildly expensive designer sunglasses was brought right back to the register after a perfectly sunny weekend. The complaint had absolutely nothing to do with the physical style, the plastic frame, or the fit. Instead, this woman was genuinely heartbroken that, while wearing them outside, the sun was still physically visible up in the sky. She somehow bought these premium shades expecting a magical, reality-altering device that would completely delete the center of our solar system from her visual field. Mother Nature apparently forgot to honor her ridiculous luxury fashion demands and kept shining anyway. 8. An entire box of shattered light bulbs was aggressively returned because they all supposedly burned out almost immediately. The furious customer passionately explained that he had purposefully installed the 60-watt bulbs into a heavy-duty ceiling fixture clearly labeled for a 100-watt maximum. Why? He genuinely believed this massive power surge would miraculously force them to shine brighter. This amateur home electrician was essentially trying to overclock his fragile household glass fixtures, resulting in predictably explosive and disastrous results. You simply cannot negotiate with the raw laws of electricity, no matter how loudly you yell at the retail manager. 9. In a truly stunning test of grocery bakery policy, a married couple actually tried returning the frozen, heavily freezer-burned top tier of their own wedding cake. The official reason cited on the paperwork was that the cake tasted incredibly stale. The absolute kicker is that this bold return attempt was made exactly 1 year after their actual wedding day. It turns out the local supermarket freshness guarantee expires significantly before your first paper anniversary. Keeping a fragile dessert trapped in a frosty purgatory for 12 entire months does not exactly lock in that fresh-baked vanilla flavor. 10. A brand new pair of standard office scissors was officially returned for being overly aggressive. The customer claimed that during an intense gift wrapping session, the blade suddenly lunged ahead and completely destroyed the wrong spot of the paper. Let us accurately translate that nonsense. He pushed way too hard and violently slipped. He was seriously demanding a safety refund for his own clumsy hands and basic forward momentum. Scissors only cut exactly where you physically drive them. The physical product was totally fine, but the human pilot was a total disaster. Basic physics is completely non-refundable at this establishment. 11. The sheer audacity on display here is truly something to behold. An entirely empty bottle of ridiculously expensive wine was slammed onto the return counter. The customer angrily demanded a complete cash refund simply because he did not enjoy the lingering aftertaste. When questioned about the totally empty glass bottle, he aggressively insisted he had to drink the entire thing, pouring it glass by painful glass, just to be absolutely certain he hated it. He basically enjoyed a luxurious free buzz for the evening and then entirely expected the liquor store to retroactively sponsor his sophisticated binge drinking. 12. A heavily crumpled standard paper highway map was angrily slapped down on the register, completely covered in spilled coffee and aggressive pen marks. The furious driver claimed the printed map was entirely defective because it absolutely refused to dynamically update the massive traffic jam he was stuck in for 3 agonizing hours. This wildly confused guy fundamentally failed to understand that a static piece of printed paper from a gas station is not secretly connected to a global digital satellite network. He was genuinely screaming at folding parchment for lacking a live wireless internet connection. 13. The bulky item being dragged back into the store was a simple, elegant, and perfectly pristine full-length mirror. There was absolutely no crack, no manufacturing defect, and zero weird glass distortion. The official, handwritten reason scribbled furiously on the return slip was that this product specifically makes me look fat. The tall mirror was simply offering a level of harsh, unfiltered bodily reality that this particular customer was completely unwilling to pay for. Sometimes the reflection is completely accurate, and the visual truth is just a little too painful to hang on your bedroom wall. 14. This absolute masterpiece of retail warranty exploitation involved an older guy trying to return a crusty 15-year-old car battery. He boldly pointed to the dusty side label and cited the supposed lifetime warranty. However, he conveniently ignored the massive red flag that the original automotive manufacturer had completely gone out of business over a decade ago. The specific lifetime in question belonged exclusively to the corporate brand, not his personal timeline. Since the company was entirely dead and buried, that magical guarantee had completely expired. You cannot exactly force a financial ghost to replace your acidic junk. 15. One exceptionally confident customer returned a massive brand new flat-screen television, claiming it was completely dead on arrival. Everything looked totally legitimate and tragic until a highly observant employee casually checked the serial numbers. The tiny printed number on the back of the television itself was wildly different from the fresh barcode slapped on the new cardboard box. This supposed victim had simply shoved his ancient, permanently broken screen right into the new packaging. It was the absolute perfect retail crime, completely foiled by a tiny, inexpensive adhesive sticker and an employee who actually cared about reading. 16. A massive 7-foot inflatable snowman was unceremoniously dumped at the customer service desk on December 27th. The official reason listed for the holiday refund was simply that the product was no longer needed. The massive plastic base of the snowman was heavily caked in frozen mud and dead grass from its glorious month-long tour of duty on the guy's front lawn. It seems the magical, generous spirit of the holiday season strictly operates on a rigid 30-day retail return window. Why own seasonal decorations when you can just shamelessly rent them from a giant hardware store for entirely free? 17. A high-powered, incredibly expensive vacuum cleaner was angrily returned for being unacceptably loud during operation. The furious customer was very specific, directly comparing it to his old vacuum, which he lovingly described as whisper quiet. After a bit of incredibly confusing conversation, he casually admitted his old machine's internal motor had been completely broken and non-functional for 3 entire years. His personal baseline for acceptable household appliance noise was literally a plastic machine that did absolutely nothing. Of course, a brand new functioning motor sounds incredibly loud when you are highly accustomed to pushing dead plastic across the living room rug. 18. A cheap little packet of sewing needles was violently returned as entirely non-functional. The highly frustrated buyer loudly insisted the sharp metal sticks simply would not sew at all. She then confidently demonstrated this absurd claim by aggressively poking a piece of fabric without actually threading the needle first. The completely stunned clerk quietly recommended the optional magical add-on known to the rest of humanity as a piece of string. Basic crafting tools heavily require at least a tiny bit of human technique, not supernatural miracles. The needle was working perfectly, but the user was tragically stuck in infinite demo mode. 19. The customer service desk received a pair of ridiculously expensive, noise-canceling headphones, furiously returned as completely defective. The highly frustrated user loudly complained he could still clearly hear his wife aggressively yelling at him while wearing them around the house. After a very quick audio test by the retail staff, the premium headphones were found to be working absolutely perfectly. The ongoing domestic issue was purely a tragic matter of sheer human volume and inescapable physical proximity. Modern technology is truly amazing, but it cannot entirely mute a furious spouse standing exactly 2 inches away from your face. 20. Straight from the bizarre archives of a local coffee shop, a very angry woman returned a premium bag of whole roasted coffee beans. She loudly complained they simply would not dissolve when she forcefully dropped the hard little nuggets into her ceramic cup of boiling hot water. She was genuinely expecting a magical instant coffee experience, not an intense weekend arts and crafts project. Apparently, the actual physical grinding and brewing part of the morning ritual was entirely lost on her. You cannot just throw raw roasted seeds into hot water and pray for a sudden caffeine miracle. 21. Here is an absolute masterclass in shameless human audacity. A very confident customer casually returned a plastic gift card, loudly claiming it absolutely would not work at the store register. A very quick digital check of the card's entire transaction history revealed a wildly different story. The entire $50 balance had been completely drained on the company's own official website just 1 single hour prior to this bold physical return attempt. He was not returning a defective product at all. This guy was literally attempting a shockingly low-tech corporate bank heist right at the customer service counter. 22. A high-quality bicycle helmet, featuring a massive, terrifying crack right down the exact middle, was violently slammed onto the retail counter. The angry man was absolutely furious that the expensive protective foam broke immediately after he fell off his bike and smashed his head directly onto the hard concrete pavement. He completely and utterly failed to comprehend that the plastic helmet shattering into pieces was the exact mathematical reason his actual skull did not burst open. You miraculously survived a terrible street crash with your brain fully intact, and your absolute first instinct is to demand $20 back. 23. A sleek, state-of-the-art Blu-ray player was angrily brought back because it absolutely refused to play the guy's precious movies. The exhausted employee was just about to rapidly process the refund until he caught a terrifying glimpse of the movies in question. It was a dusty, incredibly heavy collection of bulky plastic VHS tapes straight from the 1990s. The deeply confused customer had been repeatedly trying to physically shove massive cassette tapes into the razor-thin digital disc tray, fully expecting some kind of impossible technological miracle to occur. Magic does not exist, and neither does a universal plastic hole. 24. A highly furious driver filed a loud complaint claiming his brand new windshield wipers were completely defective and constantly made a horrible, nightmare-inducing screeching noise. The completely oblivious customer then casually admitted he only ever turned them on when his car's windshield was completely dry and coated in thick, heavy dirt. He was literally using premium rain wipers as a high-speed, highly abrasive dust removal system. He was legitimately furious about the terrifying sound of thick rubber being violently dragged across bone-dry glass. Liquid water is generally a required element when actively operating things specifically designed for massive rainstorms. 25. A freshly sealed carton of expensive almond milk was aggressively returned by an older man who loudly insisted the liquid was completely rancid and clearly spoiled. As the incredibly confusing conversation slowly unfolded, it turned out he was a lifelong heavy dairy drinker who had absolutely never tasted a nut-based alternative in his entire life. He was genuinely expecting the rich, creamy taste of cow's milk that had somehow been magically squeezed directly out of a tiny roasted almond. His deeply offended taste buds immediately filed a highly formal grievance against the entire conceptual existence of vegan beverages. 26. The item being proudly returned was a beautiful, deeply fragrant, vanilla-scented decorative candle. The absolutely incredible complaint listed on the official store form? The object mysteriously got smaller after she actively lit it on fire. This grown adult woman was genuinely upset that the solid block of wax was being physically consumed by the open burning flame. She honestly believed she had somehow purchased a permanent, infinite light source that just magically happened to smell exactly like baked goods. She was literally trying to file a corporate warranty claim against the undeniable raw laws of physical combustion and thermodynamics. 27. A heavy-duty outdoor welcome mat was brought back to the hardware store looking absolutely filthy and entirely covered in thick, dark mud. The deeply offended customer was totally disgusted that the rugged fabric had gotten so ridiculously dirty after just one single week sitting outside on her front porch during a massive rainy spell. She was aggressively demanding a full cash refund for a product that had actually performed its one and only specific job with absolutely flawless, dirt-trapping, shoe-cleaning perfection. Apparently, actively preventing outdoor filth from entering her pristine home was simply too dirty of a job for this specific rug. 28. A perfectly shiny, modern kitchen toaster was angrily brought back into the store because it was supposedly only toasting one single side of the freshly sliced bread. After a very quick 5-second visual inspection, the exhausted store employee calmly pointed out that the angry customer was actively pushing the highly specialized bagel setting. The internal heating machine was working with absolute factory-level perfection. The human user, however, was the exact one who was experiencing a severe mechanical malfunction. You cannot effectively blame the kitchen appliance when your own brain entirely forgets how to read basic English buttons. 29. The absolute most wildly optimistic return of the entire chaotic day was a sloshing, pathetic, half-full plastic bag of lukewarm water. The product, happily purchased just one single hour earlier, had originally been a solid 10-pound bag of party ice. The furious complaint was that it had mostly melted during her grueling 45-minute drive home through massive bumper-to-bumper traffic in the absolute middle of a scorching July heatwave. This incredibly bold woman was genuinely trying to actively return the unyielding laws of thermodynamics in exchange for a full cash refund. Physical science simply does not care about your weekend errands. 30. A breathtakingly expensive, high-end designer dress was smoothly returned the very first Monday morning directly after a massive local charity gala. The official reason boldly given was a classic retail excuse: claiming it just did not fit quite right. However, the heavy, lingering smell of premium perfume and a tiny, carefully hidden red wine stain near the bottom hem clearly told the actual, entirely shameless story. The store's highly forgiving corporate return policy had unknowingly just entirely sponsored her wildly expensive Saturday night out. It is the absolute ultimate retail rental service for people who entirely refuse to actually buy their own wardrobe. 31. A highly rated, incredibly expensive squirrel-proof bird feeder was sadly returned for completely failing its one and only mission in life. As concrete visual evidence, the customer proudly presented a cell phone video showing a brilliant squirrel actively climbing a nearby tree, grabbing a stray plastic bag, and literally parachuting down directly onto the metal feeder like a furry little tactical paratrooper. The metal product was specifically designed to be standard squirrel-proof, not entirely immune to a highly trained Mission Impossible level rodent operative. You cannot really blame the manufacturing company when the local wildlife actively starts using advanced military airborne tactics. 32. A heavily battered smoke alarm was violently yanked directly from the living room ceiling and slammed aggressively onto the retail counter. The highly furious complaint was that the plastic safety device kept making an incredibly loud, intensely annoying noise for absolutely no reason at all. The supposed no reason, as it hilariously turned out, was the incredibly thick, black smoke aggressively billowing from a piece of burnt toast he had accidentally abandoned in the kitchen toaster for 15 straight minutes. The machine was actively screaming to save his actual life, and he forcefully decided to severely punish it for interrupting his extremely poorly managed breakfast. 33. A heavy-duty snow shovel was confidently hauled right back into the hardware store on a blazing hot afternoon in late May. The deeply frustrated customer demanded a complete cash refund because the metal tool was completely useless and actively just collecting dust in his garage. Well, obviously it was entirely useless right now. It was practically the absolute middle of summer, and the local temperature was hitting 90 degrees. He honestly treated a highly seasonal winter purchase like a temporary snowy subscription service. The exact moment the climate shifted and the actual winter snow melted away, he immediately decided the retail store should just forcefully buy back his sweaty manual labor equipment. 34. One incredibly bold older customer confidently returned a completely dead, horribly brown Christmas tree to a giant warehouse store right in the absolute middle of January. Her officially stated written reason was simply that the huge plant had mysteriously died, actively acting as if she had been maliciously sold a faulty, entirely immortal biological being. She even proudly presented the original paper receipt, meticulously stapled right directly to the tree's leftover, actively shedding nylon netting. Apparently, this specific massive retailer's highly generous return policy does not explicitly list unavoidable biological plant mortality as a rule exception. Nothing truly screams holiday spirit quite like aggressively demanding your cash back for a rotting piece of festive wood. 35. A massive, incredibly furious complaint was formally lodged against a totally frozen bag of premium boneless chicken wings. The incredibly angry customer was absolutely livid because, after fully cooking them in his oven, he shockingly discovered they were secretly just solid pieces of normal chicken breast meat. He was highly expecting actual literal wings forcefully removed from a genetically mutated, completely boneless breed of magical winged chicken. This highly confused man was essentially filing a very serious grievance against both the local frozen grocery aisle and the entire solidly established field of earthly avian biology. Boneless living chickens completely do not roam the wild, sir. 36. The customer service desk stared in absolute silence at a massive 500-pound steel security safe that had been violently dragged back into the store on a reinforced pallet. The extremely angry owner furiously claimed the high-tech locking mechanism was entirely defective straight out of the cardboard box. However, he casually skipped over the tiny little detail that he had actively locked the physical backup keys inside the thick metal box before ever actually setting the digital combination. He essentially paid top dollar to happily manufacture an indestructible permanent steel cube of absolute regret. You simply cannot file a corporate warranty claim against your own spectacular lack of basic human foresight. 37. A highly durable, brand new two-person outdoor camping tent was brought immediately back directly after a single weekend nature trip. The official reason furiously provided on the paper return form was that a truly terrifying forest spider somehow got inside. The wildly oblivious customer then casually admitted he had wildly slept with the heavy nylon tent flaps blown entirely wide open all night long in the absolute middle of a highly dense, extremely wild forest. He was absolutely appalled that a tiny member of the actual local ecosystem had bravely decided to casually wander into his glowing, open-air outdoor bedroom. Wild nature generally does entirely not respect your imaginary personal boundaries. 38. A truly gorgeous, extremely shiny acoustic guitar, still resting perfectly safely in its original cardboard box, was carried heavily back into the local music store. The highly discouraged young man aggressively returning it loudly complained that after an entire, highly grueling weekend of violently trying, he still completely could not play a single recognizable musical song. He was legitimately furious that the wildly expensive wooden instrument did entirely not magically come fully preloaded with incredible musical talent and 10 solid years of highly dedicated finger practice. Wildly buying an expensive guitar perfectly makes you an actual musician, exactly as much as buying a shiny frying pan instantly makes you a master chef. 39. An absolutely shameless man slammed a thoroughly used, highly questionable pack of premium men's underwear right onto the return counter. His extremely bold official complaint was that the supposed breathable cotton fabric was completely defective and mysteriously attracted massive, unexplainable brown dirt stains during normal daily use. The horrified teenage cashier was violently forced to process a full refund for a man who entirely refused to accept biological responsibility for his own absolute lack of basic bathroom hygiene. Returning heavily soiled personal garments is not just a massive retail crime, it is an active biological assault on minimum wage employees. 40. An incredibly expensive pair of premium hiking boots was furiously returned immediately after a single weekend wilderness trip. The entirely wet customer aggressively complained the highly advertised waterproof feature had spectacularly failed him. When calmly asked exactly where he went hiking that day, he casually admitted he had actively been wading waist-deep in a rapidly rushing river for most of the sunny afternoon, actively trying to carefully fish. The rugged leather boots were specifically designed to be waterproof against rain and trail mud, entirely not to magically function as fully wearable deep-sea personal mini-submarines. Heavy liquid water actively tends to violently pour right in when you submerge your own human knees. 41. A truly beautiful, incredibly vibrant, and very obviously artificial potted houseplant was tragically returned after 3 long weeks of complete ownership. The highly confused customer was genuinely extremely upset that, despite her highly dedicated daily watering schedule, the green plant had completely failed to miraculously grow even a single tiny inch. She had aggressively poured heavy gallons of actual wet tap water completely into a totally plastic pot, actively hoping for a massive biological miracle. It quickly turns out her highly prized personal green thumb was actually made of pure synthetic plastic, exactly like the totally fake polyester leaves she was desperately trying to magically nurture. 42. A massive, highly detailed 1,000-piece cardboard jigsaw puzzle was shamelessly returned directly to the hobby store with every single loose piece still sitting entirely right inside the box. The totally absurd reason furiously given? It was simply way too incredibly difficult to actually solve. The extremely impatient customer was genuinely totally frustrated that the puzzle was, in absolute actual fact, a highly challenging puzzle, and entirely not just a beautifully pre-assembled piece of thick cardboard art that he could instantly passively admire. He was literally aggressively returning a completely complicated mental challenge solely for having the absolute sheer audacity to actually functionally be a bit challenging. 43. The incredibly loud complaint aggressively filed against a brand new electric toothbrush was a truly bizarre one. The panicked customer firmly claimed the oral hygiene device was dangerously overly aggressive and violently vibrated entirely too uncomfortably against his teeth. Having strictly and exclusively used a cheap manual plastic brush his entire long life, He was genuinely deeply unnerved and highly terrified by the incredibly intense sensation of thousands of rapid sonic movements actively happening in his mouth. He was essentially returning the high-tech dental product specifically and purely for having the absolute massive audacity to functionally operate exactly like a fast electric machine. 44. A popular self-help paperback titled The 1-Minute Millionaire was aggressively returned for a full cash refund. The deeply disappointed man's primary reason was heartbreakingly simple. He loudly stated he had excitedly read the entire printed thing, cover to cover, and was tragically still completely and utterly not rich. The absolute best part is that he had just purchased the shiny new book the very previous afternoon. Apparently, entirely instant, wildly life-changing financial gratification and massive bank account wealth were not physically included in the cheap $15 cover price. Some wildly delusional people truly believe reality perfectly works exactly like a video game cheat code. 45. A massive, beautiful, thick hardcover cookbook filled with gorgeous professional food photos was aggressively returned in completely pristine condition. The angry older customer loudly claimed massive deliberate false advertising strictly because the actual heavy meals she wildly and poorly prepared right in her own home kitchen visually looked and tasted nothing like the highly staged professional pictures. She completely ignored her own absolutely terrible culinary human abilities. This highly confident woman was essentially trying to strictly return her own massive, tragic lack of basic human cooking skill in exchange for a full retail cash refund. The detailed book physically gives you the exact instructions, but it absolutely cannot miraculously fix your totally terrible physical execution. 46. The completely wild complaint formally lodged against a heavy retail box of 2-inch solid steel nails was that the metal pieces constantly kept bending. This would normally be a highly valid consumer manufacturing concern, except the oblivious customer then casually admitted his actual physical method. He had wildly been forcefully trying to hammer them directly into a solid, thick, concrete basement wall using nothing but the hard leather heel of his incredibly expensive fancy dress shoe. He was literally returning standard metal construction hardware purely for completely failing to magically defy the established fundamental laws of earthly physics. 47. An incredibly expensive set of professional-grade steel kitchen knives was furiously returned, specifically for being, and this is an exact quote, entirely unreasonably and dangerously sharp. The paranoid retail customer was genuinely angry that the pristine metal blades had totally effortlessly sliced right through his raw kitchen vegetables, instead of just gently bruising them like his old dulcet. He was expecting a totally harmless, blunt physical safety prop straight from a fake television cooking show, not a highly effective culinary tool. Who exactly on this crazy earth actively complains that a sharpened blade actually does its one singular cutting job perfectly? 48. A completely plain standard white cotton t-shirt was shamelessly brought right back to the clothing register for a full cash refund. The simple shirt had 0 rips, no manufacturing tears, and absolutely no structural defects. The deeply offended female customer's singular complaint, stated with total and utter seriousness, was that the fabric had gotten a highly noticeable dark brown stain on it directly after she clumsily spilled boiling hot dark coffee right down her own front. She was essentially returning the very conceptual existence of the color white simply for being way too easily soiled by her own terrible reflexes. 49. A premium, streak-free blue glass cleaner was violently returned simply for tasting absolutely and utterly awful. The deeply confused retail customer actually assumed the bright, vibrant blue chemical spray magically doubled as a refreshing oral breath mint spray and confidently tested it directly mid-aisle. Giant warning labels literally exist for highly specific legal reasons, especially the massive bold part that aggressively says strictly for glass windows, not for human mouths. The intensely cool, minty chemical finish he wildly imagined in his head was immediately replaced by the harsh, burning taste of pure, industrial regret. The household hygiene aisle simply does not equal the delicious snack aisle. 50. A heavily used, wildly popular Ouija board was returned with a genuinely terrifying written complaint attached to the cardboard box. The highly disturbed customer firmly demanded her money back strictly because the summoned spirits were being incredibly sarcastic and completely refusing to give straight answers about her financial future. She was literally holding a mass-produced piece of folded cardboard, completely responsible for the terrible attitude of local invisible demons. If you are actively using a $20 toy from a massive retail chain to magically consult the dead, the absolute last thing you should worry about is the store's customer service policy. That is the official end of our retail nightmare. Now I need you to go down to the comments and confess the absolute most shameless thing you or your incredibly cheap relatives have ever dragged back to a store. Do not lie to me. I know someone in your family returned an empty box. Hit that like button to actively apologize to retail workers everywhere, and subscribe before I legally revoke your warranty.